Yeah, that fruits and vegetables are needed for that. Well, why would plants be unhealthy? Aren't they just growing for our benefit? Well, no. They want to survive too, and they can't run away, so most of their defenses are chemical ones. Here's just a list of the most common kinds of toxins that they use to kill herbivores, especially insects. Basically, you're eating a pile of insecticide when you eat a plant. There are alkaloids that are in nightshades. They can cause nerve transmission and DNA problems and alter carb and fat metabolism. There are cyanogenic glycosides, which happen in tapioca, which is a significant source of calories in some parts of Africa. They become toxic when you bite them, releasing things like cyanide. There are terpenoids, which are volatile oils. They're found in citrus and other plants. And our special darlings, the phenolics, which are flavonoids, tannins, lignin, cannabinoids. They basically just make it hard for you to digest protein and may cause other problems as well. Now, I'm not anti-drug. I think drugs have a role, and I think that getting drugs out of plants can be very important to solve problems that are not quickly solvable by lifestyle intervention. And you can do that with plants. But it typically isn't a dose that you would just get from eating a salad. You would have to isolate it and concentrate it, and then you're going to have side effects like you would with any other drug. So I don't buy the argument that we should just be eating a whole variety of plants to make sure we're getting all these compounds that might somehow add up to helping us. They might somehow add up to harming us as well.
So how about other toxins that damage the gut? And as you heard Paul talk about, lectins are a type of defense protein that binds to sugars. And I want to put it in an evolutionary context. What did they evolve to do? They're very ancient molecules. They've been around long before there were, they've been around long before there were primates, long before there were mammals. Did plants evolve them to defend against mammals? I would say probably not. They're probably evolved originally as protection from pathogens, fungi and bacteria and insects and other things like this. But because of biosimilarity, they affect us. Now, again, tying in with our previous talk, 5 raw red kidney beans make a person quite sick. And when people say we need to prepare beans properly, well, as you know, the preparation methods may not get rid of all the lectins. They may reduce the amount. But lectins are especially high in beans and grains. Some have lectins that are especially problematic. Peanuts are an example. Wheat is an obvious example. And if we look at wheat germ agglutinin, we've known for more than 40 years that this is a potent anti-fungicide. It affects wheat rust, for instance. And it inhibits fungi, and it also binds to bacterial cell walls, so probably defends against bacteria as well. So we know this is involved in pathogen defense. This is so potent against insects that biotech companies have genetically engineered crop plants to express wheat germ agglutinin. This is kind of disturbing. Let's say that somebody did not have any sensitivity to a plant, and you splice wheat germ agglutinin into it, then you might have sensitivity to the plant in which it was spliced if the plant is actually expressing wheat germ agglutinin. So it might be great for the farmer, but not so good for the human eating that plant that didn't realize what had been spliced into it. So this is just a paper from 2012, genetic manipulation of tomato using wheat germ agglutinin through, and they used a bacterial cell to move it into the tomato. Disturbing if that became widespread. We also know, as you've heard, that wheat germ agglutinin can actually get into the whole body or systemic circulation, and it can then damage parts of the body remote from the gut. And we've known about this again for many, many years. This paper dates back to 1993. And we know that wheat germ agglutinin affects human gut epithelial cells, contributing to leaky gut. And we've known about this. This is a paper from 10 years ago talking about this. So wheat germ agglutinin is a problematic substance. And we know it drives inflammation in humans. The dietary intake of wheat and other cereal grains and their role in inflammation, paper from 2013. Now, wheat germ agglutinin is sensitive to temperature. And so you might think, well, cooking will remove this, reduce it. Well, we know that. We can reduce the amount of lectins by processing. But how about cereals and other processed foods? How well are they treated? How about uncooked or poorly cooked wheat products? Many of us as kids probably ate cookie dough. How about wheat germ? Health food people often just add wheat germ, uncooked wheat germ, to their foods. How much wheat germ agglutinin are they getting? And what is that causing? Which is very ironic since they're doing that presumably for health reasons. So some people may be getting quite a bit of wheat germ agglutinin in these ways. So ironically, wheat germ agglutinin damage to humans is probably a quirk of our evolutionary history, of our shared cellular biology with organisms like fungi and insects. These plants didn't evolve this to get us. Now, there's another category of toxins. I had some this morning, caffeine. Caffeine is an alkaloid. There's an alkaloid in chocolate called theobromine. And these are, chemically, these are referred to as xanthines. Okay? And it turns out that we're able to metabolize xanthines with one of our liver enzymes, one of our P450s. But dogs can't detoxify these very well. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about dogs, but I'll link back in. So you've all heard that you can poison a dog with chocolate. You can poison them with coffee, too, but dogs aren't likely to drink coffee because it's bitter. But the sweetness of chocolate entices them. So if you think this isn't poisonous, this is a paper from the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, evaluation of cocoa and coffee-derived methylxanthines as toxicants for the control of pest coyotes. They're testing this stuff to use as coyote poisons. Okay? I mean, that's how toxic these things are to canines. Fatal dose is in the range of 100 to 250 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That's literally death by chocolate. And to put this into a form that's a little more understandable, I went into the veterinary medical literature. Oh, by the way, symptoms of vomiting, staggering, agitation, seizures, and in some cases death because it can affect the central nervous system. You can go into the veterinary medical literature, though, and look, and if you do the calculations, you can find out that an 18-pound dog, so not a big dog, but not a little dog either, can be poisoned by consuming 2 ounces of dark baking chocolate. So 2 ounces is not a lot of chocolate. So that can be a fatal dose for a dog. Now, it'd take a lot of milk chocolate to kill a dog, but not dark chocolate. Now, here's why I mentioned the dog. Different species of animals have slightly different liver P450 enzymes. And so there are many things that other animals can eat that we can't, and vice versa. But people also have genetic differences in their liver detox capability. And in fact, there's a 40-fold variation in people's abilities to detoxify caffeine. So it's not surprising that some people are much more affected by caffeine than others. Different tolerances. Another type of toxin are something referred to as oxalates. And a scientist named Sally Norton is doing a lot of research on this right now. She spoke at Ancestral Health a couple of years ago. You can find her lecture online about oxalates. It's very interesting. But these are This would include oxalic acid and its salts and crystals. And maybe you've heard of calcium oxalate. That's the most abundant insoluble mineral found in plants. It's very, very common in lots and lots of plants. And in plants, it's present in both a crystalline form and an ionic form. Now, in humans, when we eat these things, the crystals can actually cause physical damage to our body, to various parts of the body. The ionic form, though, will bioaccumulate and will build up in certain tissues. And it can do a variety of things. It can reduce mineral absorption, but it accumulates in organs, including the kidneys. And some of you have probably had calcium oxalate kidney stones in the past. I had those. And that can be a very unpleasant experience. You want to eat that. Now, oxalates are in many food plants. There have been cases of, they're rare, but fatal poisoning from overconsumption of rhubarb and starfruit and sorrel. And high oxalate foods, such as spinach, spinach is it's kind of the poster child of this, contributes to kidney stones and accumulation in other organs like the thyroid. Also, consumption of a diet that's overall high in oxalates, so if you have a diet that has lots of spinach, lots of beets, lots of nuts, chocolate, and a number of other things, can be very problematic for some people. We apparently vary a great deal in our ability to deal with oxalates, and that goes back to this idea of bioindividuality. What will hurt one person may not have nearly as bad an effect on someone else. So different people have varying genetic abilities to deal with oxalates, and this varies with age, environmental conditions, the gut microbiome, a number of others. Decades since the 1940s that one of these hormone mimics in plants called isoflavones, and these are in some members of the bean family, they cause serious reproductive problems in sheep, including sterility. And there are problems known from many other animals. Soybeans contain isoflavones, some of these hormone mimics. And turns out these probably, again, had nothing to do with us, probably nothing to do even with mammals, but they're excellent fungicides. They are able to provide protection against a particular group of fungi called the rust. There are fungi called rust and smuts. And so these provide protection against rust. And we can see if you infect a soybean plant, for instance, as you note over here, if you infect it with a rust, it will then upregulate its production of these plant defense chemicals. So you can measure before infection and after infection, and the soybean plant will make more, which makes perfect sense if you're thinking about a defense chemical. So how about consumption of large amounts of soy products in the human diet? Well, I want us to think about a couple of things. There are people, probably no one in this room, who would recommend soy for menopausal women. Here's a book that from a few years ago by a physician, The Estrogen Alternative, the Soy Solution for Menopause. You can go into any health food store and you can find soy supplements, presumably to help women whose estrogen levels are falling to mitigate some of the symptoms. So let's think about this for a minute. You have physicians recommending this, at least some. Why would you do this? Baby formula. So here we have babies at the time of their life when they're very sensitive to hormonal signaling. How many times a day would a baby be fed soy formula? 6, 8? I don't know exactly, depending, probably a couple hours between each feeding. Be the only food they're getting, day after day after day. Why do this is what I would say. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. We know from research in humans that soy causes a reduction in sperm quality in men and causes changes in sex hormone ratios. We know that these things can have some effects even in adult humans. Now, how bad are these effects? I don't know. I personally choose not to eat soy. But there have been some review studies of both human and animal models, and the research raises real concern about children. So I would just say, why do it? We know that from research about 10 years ago that the urine levels of these isoflavones are 500 times higher in infants fed soy formula. Now, are they harming the children? Well, I don't know. How sensitive is an individual child? When we think about bioindividuality, everybody's different. Based on genetics, based on gut barrier function, based on microbiome, what percentage of children that are getting these formulas may be injured. There are obviously kids that are lactose intolerant, but I would say there have to be better alternatives than to feed a child a compound that is known to contain, by the way, not just these chemicals, but also, as you remember from the very beginning of my talk, you have soybean protease inhibitors, and there are also compounds in soy that can affect the thyroid. They're called goitrogens. So soybean literally kind of hits the jackpot on a number of different kinds of toxins, all in one little package. So I would summarize then by saying the problems caused by the consumption of some plants, particularly in large doses, is not surprising in the evolutionary context. Plants evolved to fight back, and we did not evolve to eat huge quantities of any particular plant, as we're doing in the modern world. Some people get a very large percentage of their calories from, it might be soy, it might be wheat. When you focus in on one group, that would then be a recipe for disaster. So I would leave you with this: beware what you eat. Plants are not necessarily your friends.